Welcome to our recap episode. All of the episodes so far were recorded late in the summer of 2020.
So we've pulled together 5 clips for this recap episode, but we strongly encourage you to go to listen to the full episodes because we're going to reference stories that you need to go and get from those episodes. So stick around after the clips for a quick recap chat at the end.
Welcome to So You Want to Be an Ally. We share our stories
and our insights on non-Black allyship to Black women.
My name is Darlene. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I help parents advocate for their Black and brown kids' emotional and racial identity development needs. And that's because our kids deserve the opportunity to grow, learn, strive, and thrive.
My name is Olanike. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And my life experience led me to becoming an advocate for equity in the workplace, which led me to starting a consulting business where I help workplaces who want to do better. Want to be an ally? Gather round
and listen up. So this first clip is pulled from episode 1, where we talked about why you need to be an ally in the first place. We know that allyship is a word that has been around for a minute and it has taken on various forms. And that, again, in itself could be a whole nother conversation. But I do like this idea of using the word accomplice or comrade because we know how important language is. And all of these labels carry a different weight, right? Even thinking about accomplice, like, right? You think, for me, when I hear that word, I think, oh, somebody's about to get into some trouble with me, boy.
Yeah.
We about to, and that might be the persona that you want to take on as an ally, right? Or you want to be a comrade and you just want to, like, after the fight is over, you want to get alongside them and, like, just push them forward, encourage them. And, maybe you don't have the wherewithal to, at that moment, to be able to speak up and switch the conversation.
Yeah. There's so many different ways.
Yes.
We'll have a conversation about that too. Like, what are the, we'll go deeper. I know we've said a lot, I think, already in this conversation about how to do it and what to do, but you're right. There's so many different ways that it can come up. I mean, it just becomes, it's part of, like, behavior, I guess, and ways of being that, the more you step out of your comfort zone and practice with it, the more you not only notice opportunities to do something or say something or be something that's needed in the moment, the more you'll actually be able to know, like, what to do, what to say, what to be, who to be.
And all of that, those different ways kind of reflect on or kind of relate back to why you need to be an ally in the first place. So, I mean, because this whole episode could have been about all the atrocities that have been going on for the past however many years in various places, all the way up until just
last week, since 1619.
Right. So we can do that. We can go over that, but I think the world gets so complacent and wanted to stay with slavery as if today there's nothing to be done. Or we get so caught up in the latest headline of somebody being shot in the middle of the street for no reason. Or we get caught up in, some other group of people being locked in cages or their rights being taken away. Like, those are the things that are large. But I find that getting people to make more of the intentional smaller steps or where we can move this, right? So we go back to our original statement about the system, right? These are to add yourself to a larger body. And if you commit to one little thing, imagine 1,000 people doing that one little thing. That's how change happens. The majority has to have one small little indignation about one little thing. And that collective group is what moves things. But I think people get fearful, as you talked about earlier, about what it means. They see allyship as often this huge sacrifice. And that's not to say it won't happen and it won't occur. But if you look at the changes that have actually happened, it's like the ants, right? The small little ants who just all pick together and collectively.
It's building. Building and building and building.
That is where we come in. That's what it means to be an ally in the first place. And that's why we need allyship. Because if you look at all movements in America's history. Like, it wasn't done in isolation.
This next clip is pulled from episode 4, where we talked about when allyship should show up.
I'm intentionally protecting my psychological safety all of the time. So if we're Facebook friends and you want to engage me in a conversation about race and you're in denial about that, you know, like racism even exists, I can't have a conversation with you. Because on a psychological level, I am not safe in that conversation, and I'm not safe with you. And I'm not in a position where I'm being, you know, I've been asked and I've agreed to come and teach or train.
That's right.
So yeah, I would definitely say for some people, the all of the time answer is not probably the answer that you should run with. But I think you should be thinking about it all of the time. You should be looking for an opportunity to do so, to be an ally, if that is what you have decided you want to do.
One of the things you and I talked about as we're getting or linking this to the question of when should it happen, I find that your friend, whoever texted you about that person, I don't know if that friend was someone you consider an ally or another Black person, but even thinking about what you just described about the onus that, or the weight that is often put on us as Black people to educate white people, like that would be a great place to be an ally. So, you know, Susie Q has no idea, or as I joked with Nikkei earlier about Karens coming out with their posters during the protest, like some Karens are waking up, they're realizing that they might be some Karens. So that's a perfect place for when allyship should show up, because allyship does not necessarily always have to be next to a Black person. And if you're finding yourself where that's when it's showing up for you, then you want to do some work around that as well. Because part of the conversation that we'll get into later is around the motivators. So we ask, when should it show up? Well, we have to ask about the motivators for when it shows up, right? Because you're going to be motivated by various things that trigger you to show up and take on the role and identity of an ally. And those motivators behind that are going to really inform how you behave in those spaces, right? So, you know, if you're motivated to kind of deal with your guilt and your anxiety and you're all of a sudden like, oh my God, I need to fix what has happened for the last 400 years. That's going to be different than, say, the Karen who realized that, you know, she might have misstepped a couple times at work. And she's like, I made some errors. How do I correct this? Because if you even listen to it, one's more of a reflective thing and one's more of an action-oriented thing. So I might be getting a little too deep and pretty much outside of the scope of this. And this may need to be a whole nother segment, but it really goes to this idea of that onus can go on another ally, like taking the ownership away from the Black woman to have to explain and describe. As an ally, you can easily step into that role. And I know I would be happy to have a list of people I can send your way because I'm tired of talking to them. So if we're talking about when it should show up, that would be a great place.
That's a great place. Like, be the person that's like, okay, I'll be the person to talk to my fellow white people or even my fellow Asian people, my fellow Indian, like non-Black person when it comes to Black anti-Black racism and Black issues. Yeah, the psychological safety piece is really, really important. And as a Black woman in America, I've learned to live with anti-Black racism. You learn to function with it. But at times like these, so we are recording and having this conversation at a time where the world is paying attention to what is going on in the United States as far as the protesting and the demonstrations for change in our policing and in our criminal justice system. It's everywhere right now. Everyone is looking for ways to be an ally. Everyone is asking questions. People are sharing articles. We are sharing articles and resources to help people understand and learn more about what is the history here? What is the long-term, centuries-long history that has brought us to where we are today? And what can you do about it? So it can be overwhelming, but being an ally and going further, not just being an ally with your words, because I think there's a difference with saying I care and I stand with you, and there's that, and then there's like I will carry this weight with you. I am going to fight this fight as though it is my fight as well, not just because I care about you, but because I see how this impacts all of us, right? So I think any opportunity that you are aware of where you see that there's an opportunity for you to help make space for Black people, amplify the voices of Black people, challenge whatever narrative is happening that may be dehumanizing Black people, whatever things or actions are actually taking place that are dehumanizing to Black people. Whenever that's happening in your presence, that is an opportunity for you to show up with your allyship.
This next clip is pulled from episode number 5. This is where we talked about how allies should show up.
If someone had said, I never thought about it that way before, but I really want to look more into that.
Yes.
That would have been fantastic.
And you know what I like about that last one? The simplicity of it, right? Because one of the things we talked about, the quality, right? The quantity. So we're not looking for super eager people with capes on to just like know all the literature and know all of the experience, and just simply acknowledging, like the example that you use with the post, like just acknowledging like other people had done before he asserted himself that no, everything is fine. It's fine out here for all of us. Like that would be ideal, right? Just simply saying, hey, that must be tough. Or wow, I'd never even considered that. Like in such brevity, like the brevity of it is just like, that's what you do to just anchor the experience. And of course you can only do that if you truly understand. So again, it goes back to this idea of what kind of quality of work have you done with yourself?
Have you done?
To examine these experiences, the possibility. Like even the Black guy, I know that's a whole nother podcast, but even for the Black man to speak up, like clearly he wasn't aligning himself with those experiences, mostly because he had centered himself in his experience, which kept him away from accessing the possibility that there are other experiences. And so again, looking at the quality, right? Like allyship work is done around the possibility or potential for those things that we know exist in the world to occur in the space that we're talking about. That's what it's about. It's not about confirming or denying the presence of anything. It's about acknowledging the potential and doing the work around assuring that what happened in the past doesn't continue going on. That's literally what our work is.
Acknowledging the potential. I love that. That's baseline. Just acknowledge. Baseline. That's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But here is where I about earlier. The Black man and the white man. There's some defensiveness there. There was defensiveness with the Black man, right? I again, this is my psychology. I promise you I'm not guessing. If I talk to him, I can't imagine what it felt like for him to be the Black guy in the room. Everybody look at him like, do you agree? Do you agree with what she's saying?
And he felt like feeling
compelled. Because it's hard for him too. It's hard to be a Black man and it's one of two of y'all. Like, I get it. I understand. Nothing wrong there. And even for that white man to and feeling like the world is looking at them and they're like, well, no, that's not what's going on. The same people, the same exact response. That is a natural defensiveness that you're going to have to push through.
This clip coming up is from episode number 2. We discussed the historical context of racial trauma and how that is really foundational to conversations about microaggressions. Let's get back to my mama bear story. So the Whole Foods story is my daughter and I are in Whole Foods. And before we get ready to check out, she wanted some gelato. So we walk over to the counter in the sort of on the side, right, in the cafe area where they have the gelato. And we stand there for a few minutes. We can see I'm calling her girl because she was probably like 20 years old or something, maybe mid-20s.
She's a young adult.
She's a young adult, really. The young adults.
Too many words.
The girl. Yeah, the girl. the young lady that was working behind the counter. She was white or at least white presenting. And she was over at the cash register, right? She was over at the cash register checking someone out. So we're just kind of sitting there and I'm like, okay, looks like that person might take a little while. I'm going to go to the register and check out. Baby girl, you stay here. She was maybe 8 years old at the time, maybe 9. I think maybe more like 9. So you stay here. I'm going to go to the cash register. I can see her from the cash register and she can see me. When the young lady behind the counter comes over, tell her what you want and let her know that I'll be right back. So she's standing there, and because I'm my eyes are always on her in public, like I'm not taking my eye off of her, because even though I'm at the cash register, because I'm keeping an eye on her and making sure she's okay. As I'm at the cash register, waiting in that line, I see 2 white girls. Now these are actual girls about her same age, walk up together. And they start, perusing the options, the gelato options as well. The cashier, after the white girls get there, walks over and starts engaging the 2 girls that just walked, white girls that just walked over, in conversation. So I see her basically starting to serve the 2 girls, and I lost it. I marched out of line. I was like, I'm not checking out right now. I can't even check out right now. What the heck is going on?
You said,
so I marched.
Not about to do.
what we're not gonna do is act like right, like she wasn't here waiting for much longer. I mean, she and I waited there together for a while before I walked away. And I was still watching her before these 2 girls walked up, and then the cashier walked over. So what if you were just kind of in the area watching? Here's what you would have seen happen. I march over there. I interrupt the conversation that she's having with the 2 girls, and I look at them, in a way to say, like, excuse me, girls, right? Like, yes. I need to talk to her for a minute, because it's not their fault. I acknowledge them. They did absolutely nothing wrong. It wasn't about them, right? And I wanted them to know that it's, like, they're okay. So I kind of walk over and I look at the 2 girls and said, hey, girls, and I look at the young lady and I said, I'm sorry, did you see that my daughter was here ahead of them? Why did you not serve her first, right? And I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was some version of I didn't know, I didn't see her, I wasn't sure, I just walked over here, something like that.
So we have uncertainty and invisibility.
To which I say to her, why didn't you just ask? Yeah. Right? You just completely ignored her. I was standing here with her. I walked off. I saw these 2 young girls come over afterwards, and you just went straight to serving them.
Yes.
Why is that? Now, so, and I'm animated. Yes. I'm not cussing though. I'm not like using, I'm not like, cussing at her or anything crazy like that. But I was very annoyed, very frustrated. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then she immediately starts asking, what does she want? What do you want? And then she gives her like an extra scoop of gelato. I didn't even want her to have the first scoop in the first place. I'm like, I don't need the extra scoop. Like, that's not what I need from you, right?
Taking our service.
I don't want her to have that much sugar in the first place. What I really wanted you to do is acknowledge her and see her and not treat her like she's invisible. Yes. I don't want her to have that, to accept that as she grows up. Yes. And I'm sure the young lady had no context and she just thought I got mad because somebody else got served first. And that's probably was the beginning and the end of what she thought was going on. Yep. But what was going on was so much deeper than that. And even my daughter was like, oh my God, Mom, you're so embarrassing. Why did you have to yell at her?
Because she didn't get it either.
And because she didn't understand what was happening either. Too. Yep. I think she gets it now at 13 years old.
I'm sure she does.
But back then, she didn't get it. She was just like, it was okay. It's okay. It's okay, Mom. It's okay. And I'm like, no, it's not okay. Yes. Because what we have to live with in this society, in these, as I like to say, in these United States,
right,
is always being invisible. When we're walking down the sidewalk, we, the Black and brown people, have to move out of the way of the white people. And if we think back to Jim Crow laws, some of these were actual factual laws on the books. So the history is so deep in this country of, like, the general have been taught in this country that Black and brown people are invisible, and it's okay to not see us.
Our last clip is from episode number 3. We talked about the survivor response to racial abuse. This was the second part to our conversation about microaggressions. You know, and at this point, like you said, I'm a mother bear. I have a whole Black son.
Right.
A whole Black son. And nobody knows, like, how many times I've looked at my son when he has on, like, shorts and a T-shirt and look at him, in no shirt. And I swear to God, this is, like, 100% transparent. I've looked at him and said, man, somebody would have used him as a slave. Like, he would have fit. And that's some scary shit, y'all.
Damn.
Like, it's crazy. Like, how many times I've when I'm holding him or sitting next to him and he just walking around here I just thank God. I'm just so grateful.
Wow.
Because somebody would have took him from me. They would have stole him from me and used him. And white allies, this is what you have to understand, that it's not so far removed.
It is present.
This is stuff that replays.
It is everyday. Yes.
This is stress and trauma. The anxiety about what it means to send my son out. The anxiety for him not to be prepared. The avoidance. The plan and prepare for the next time. So you talked about the PTSD and what it looks like in that trauma. The preparing and planning for the next altercation. For the next time somebody's going to say something discriminatory or some microaggression to me. And how can I prepare for this? How can I plan for this? What are the costs and the outcome? You know, if I decide to fight, what are the costs and outcome if I just I'm just going to quit the job, forget it. What are the costs and outcome if I just freeze and I don't say nothing? Oh my God. And then what about the go along to get along? Because that's the thing too. This is the responses to trauma: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So fawn is a newer one for those of us.
Yeah, tell us about fawn.
But fawn basically means I'm a go along to get along. It's the fawn, think of a deer, right? And you just kind of prance in and just, it's like, oh, that didn't bother me. I'm okay. And then you go back to your office and be like, and so you go home and you vent about it because you boxed in all your frustration and the disrespect that you experienced, but you got to get it out somewhere because it can't stay there. But you have to think about it. These are all survival responses. And we as a people have been in survival in response to this racial stress and trauma for so long. We stay in survival mode. And so that's where we are. These are the complexity. We've been talking, I don't know how long. And I want our allies to understand that all of this is what's in our brain. Can you imagine?
In like microseconds. This is what you prick when you say, you wrote that report? Yes. Oh, you're so articulate. Oh, I like your hair a lot better when it's straight.
Touch your hair.
Or this is the like open wound that you stick your finger in when you say those things and we snap. Yeah, hopefully you understand. You get it now.
Yeah, because you said you want to be ally. So this is not an excuse. This is an understanding. Yeah. So hopefully you get it. So if you've aligned with us, if you consider yourself an ally, and this is not to say you have to accept anybody mistreating you, but understand, and I've said this before, so I need everyone listening to understand that there is a cultural difference in communication between white and Black people on a general level. Now, of course, there are variations, right, on the spectrum, but mostly, for the most part, I know in my experience and those that I've talked with about this, most Black people are direct.
Yep.
Whereas the white-centered approach to communication is a roundabout way, right? So where I'm going to say, hey, you're stepping on my toe, what you tend to hear in spaces where it's mostly white-centered, or maybe you could think of an example like it's more like, oh, well, I could see that you were on your way to the bathroom and you intentionally bumped my table. And in doing that, it brought you over here and you stepped on my toe.
Right. And my toe was stepped on. I wonder who stepped on my toe. Do you know who might have stepped on my toe? Even though you were the only one here near my toe?
This very over, like around the way.
Roundabout, like just get to the point already.
Yes. And so that is, I can understand why people perceive, me to be too direct or have difficulty with my directness because it comes off as very sharp. But that is my communication style. And so if I'm in the middle of being microaggressed against, I'm not about to fluff you. I'm going to tell you, I don't like that. And I'm not yelling. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't put a lot of energy behind it. But guess what? If I decided to, I have that right. Why? Because I just told you, I just spent this last hour or 50 minutes or however long.
Telling you all the things.
Everything I'm carrying.
So you're now joining us for our recap chat on the clips that you just listened to.
So in our first clip, we talked a lot about this worker ant phenomenon. Like that's what stood out for me. This idea that we all know based on what we've been observing, been experiencing over these last couple years and beyond, that, this is a challenging feat to take on, it's both as a person who is experiencing it and also as an ally. So for me, that worker ant phenomenon was really an important piece that if I would want you to take away anything from, that episode, it would be this idea that this is hard work, this is overwhelming work, and the best way to be impactful is to do what the worker ants do. They pick up a little piece and they bring it back to the larger hive.
Yes.
But that's a bee, right? But the ants have the same.
It's actually dynamic. The same. Oh, look at that emergent strategy. If y'all don't know Adrienne Marie Brown, go look her up. It's the same concept. Mm-hmm. You see it all the time in nature. Mm-hmm. Like every individual ant, bee, bird, does their little piece. Yep. Yeah, that was a clip where we talked about ally versus accomplice. And the idea, even though the accomplice word can sort of conjure this negativity, like we're getting in trouble together, the idea is really that worker ant, like we have to do this together. And in that episode, I think we shared a quote at the end that says, we need our allies and our accomplices to share in this anti-racism work as though your, freedom, your livelihood, you are also invested in it. There's something in it for you. It's not just charity work.
Right.
Because it is really, we all suffer. Obviously at varying levels of extremity, but we all suffer as a result of this. And so we should all be invested in it for ourselves and for our future. So the second clip was, I think we got into anti-racism a little bit in that clip. That was the clip about when allies should show up. And even though all of the time seems like an extreme answer, I feel like that is really the answer because, racism doesn't take vacations. It doesn't take breaks. It doesn't nap. It doesn't rest. It is persistent AF. So, all of the time answer was also tied in that clip to the fact that for us as Black women, when we're in this scenario, in the middle of an engagement with someone, an interaction with someone, those are the times that we need to rest and take a break, and we need you to step up and support us by being the one that acknowledges what's going on, talks to the person that maybe we're interacting with that is actually starting to harm us in an emotional or mental way because they don't really understand the impact of what they're doing or saying. So that's really important.
And for me in that episode, one of the things that stood out is when you said, "I am not safe," as a way to call out what's happening in moments when you are experiencing that anti-Black racism, right? That acknowledgement, that awareness of how you navigate that. And it's important for us as Black people to be able to say that, to be able to acknowledge that. One of the things that happens when we are in the midst of a microaggression or something that's overt, it's wait a minute, is this really happening? Right? And no, for real. And so that sends you in this mental spiral. And so part of that, when you said that to me, it really shook me because, you know, this is about protecting our psychological health.
Yeah.
You know, especially with everything that's coming on TV, especially with just the constant reintroduction to the way society wants to keep trying to remind us where we stand. The more we fight, the more they try to remind us, right? And so that takes a toll on your psychological safety. And the other piece that I thought was really like that really stood out was the term anti-Black racism. Like, think about that.
Yes.
Like, it's very specific. Like, the way, first of all, we know that most people just don't even want to acknowledge racism. I tell you this all the time. Like, I feel like white people are more concerned about being called racist than they are about actually performing out racism.
Oh, yes.
It is it's like, oh my God, I would never.
Right.
But in reality, your thought process, your engagement, your automatic assumptions about Black folks, it's literally anti-Black. And it doesn't, as a Black woman, it doesn't only sit with white people. Like, anti-Blackness is an entire geographical, worldwide, all across the globe dynamic. So even going back to that, I'm not safe. Like, it's interesting how, in my mind, I recognize that, you know, I can go across this globe and still have to consider the fact of whether or not I'm safe. In Asian countries, like I really, in Africa, on the whole continent of Africa, so much colonization has happened that I can go in the place where I'm supposed to be the safest and still be exposed to those dynamics. In the whole African country, people will still try and treat you like it ain't your country. Like,
oh yeah, what
do you mean?
I had a white man just walk by me at the airport in Ghana recently. I was like, oh, so you just gonna be acting out over here in my territory? No, just
hey, don't claim it, girl. Like, this is my country.
But you know what? Oh my God, that was such a subtle moment. He tried to walk past me to get a cart at the airport, and there was a Ghanaian, a man standing there actually handing out the cards. And the man just ignored him and handed the cart right to me. I was like,
come on,
yes,
man.
brother, yeah.
Come on.
Let me do a little shout.
That's what we need.
I was just like, yes, you're not getting here. Not here. Not today.
Oh my God, it'd be so great to experience that. Like, I want to have those experiences like in Atlanta, Georgia, right? It's like,
right.
I just want to go to North Carolina.
We don't do that here,
put a white person in their place, like, or white or non-white, like everybody else but Black. Because again, it just exists among us. So that was the one thing that stood out, or the couple of things that stood out about that episode.
For real.
All right. So clip 3, we go into the moving past defensiveness to acknowledge the potential for racist behavior. So it's this idea, for me, what stood out. Now, mind you, this is the how allyship shows up, right? And for me, the one thing that stood out about that clip was it boiled down to quality versus quantity. So you often hear people say performative, right? Have you ever heard that term? It's more about how people want to behave as if they're allies, but it doesn't align, like, meaning it's out in the public for people to see. But when you start sitting down at tables with folks and asking them to put policy into place, or for them to have awareness about their language or something like that, then you often see it shed real quick. And so that, for me, was the premise for this particular clip. It was this idea of, you know, the acknowledgement, right? The how people acknowledge versus how people actually exist within it. I thought that was super powerful.
And I mean, you know, the baseline thing you can do as an ally, as an accomplice, is to just acknowledge what's going on.
Yeah.
Period. Like, even if it's not your own experience. That was something that you said in that that was kind of like a really clear instruction, is it may not be your experience, but the whole idea is not to center your experience, is to acknowledge that that it is possible that there are other experiences that you don't have and that you might not have even noticed. So acknowledging the potential that there's something happening that you don't recognize is baseline in that work. And I think in this clip is the one where we referenced a story, and you're just gonna have to go back and listen to the full episode, episode 5, the how allies should show up, to really understand the story. We referenced a story, something that happened to me in a work environment in a diversity and inclusion council meeting where this defensiveness showed up, and we kind of broke it down. And listen, Dr. Davis was in the house on that episode. I was just like, I was learning so much from a like psychological perspective. It was so good.
Oh yeah, that's what we talked about, the defensiveness, right? We talked about that natural defensiveness and pushing through that. Yeah, I remember that.
That was brilliant.
Because it was really, I remember that. Yeah, it was about the idea, because we talked about the Black guy, like what it means from the perspective of the Black guy.
And the white woman.
The white, And
there were Black women in the room that talked to me after the incident. Yeah, it was like layers and layers of just teaching. It was
it was good. And I also like from that one too, like talking about just the how in general. One of the things that was said was like this super eager folks with capes on, right? So I don't need that whole that whole white saviorism.
Save you.
Yes. That's definitely the episode. So if you are anyway interested, and you or that's one of your bugs. That's one of my buttons. Yeah. Oh my God. That white savior is just sending me out. Like it's so prevalent in education. Oh my God, it sends me out like all the way. Like you talking about lay prostrate. I just be like, oh my God, I'm over this. So yeah, that's definitely absolutely. That's the episode. So yeah, that one, come back. When y'all, this is the other thing, when y'all listen to these clips, please come back and email us. Let us know what y'all think. Let us know. If there's a topic that you feel like it stems from like what it triggered in you, please bring it back to us.
Absolutely. Some of y'all are texting me on the side, like email us, put it on social media, share. Let's spread the word about what you're learning and taking away from the podcast. So the next clip was the Mama Bear story, and this story is like notorious. Yes, because we are Mama Bears.
Yes.
We love our children
and everybody else's kids. I'm that person.
Exactly.
Like, I'm gonna protect your
I look at your kid in the store and be like, oh, "Come on, baby, get it."
That's right. I'm gonna love on them. I'm gonna correct them very respectfully too, right? I'm very respectful of young Black people because they have their own struggles that I don't think we pay attention a lot to as like adults.
So true.
So yeah.
So true. So yeah, we talk about the Whole Food story, another one, which really what was sort of illustrative in that story that you may have heard about and seen folks talk about is the extremes when it comes to the visibility of Black people, but Black children. It's either one or the other, right? It's either we are completely invisible, which is the thing that triggered me and caused me to act out in Whole Foods, is, seeing that happen to my then 9-year-old. And it's something that I've already been sort of trying to sort of guide her around, like when we're walking down the sidewalk and I see her sort of moving aside for other children or for, typically white children or adults, I'm trying to toe the balance of like, yes, respect your elders, but there's a second layer I have to think about, and like, don't make yourself invisible.
Exactly.
Don't just accept it and step aside on the sidewalk, or you were sitting there first and somebody walks in and then you like all of a sudden get up. Like there was just some weird things that I thought that started to happen. So it was something very, very specific that I already had my eye on. And then when I saw it happening in Whole Foods, I was like, oh, hell no.
Yes.
So there's that invisibility extreme. And then there's a whole other side, which is the hypervisibility, which is when you do see us, when they see us, right? It is extreme. It is in a negative light. It is in a violent light. It is seeing us is met with negativity and violence. And it happens, we're probably naturally already thinking, especially in the current news cycle, about the policing and the hypervisibility that's happening with policing. But y'all, it's happening in the school.
Absolutely.
It's happening at schools.
Absolutely.
There's a whole body of research even that talks about what is happening in terms of how hypervisible our children are in a negative way and how they're getting punished in more extreme ways than their non-Black counterparts in a classroom setting. You can Google school to prison pipeline, and go down that rabbit hole if you would like to. So it's just, and I think we're going to talk about our next series and give you a little sneak peek on where we're headed in the next series. But it's going to touch on some of these, Black child experiences from our perspective. So, yeah, and we just want to chill out in the middle and be human, and we just want our children to be kids. Right. I mean, can we just let them
be kids? And we know this is super relevant at this time, because remember, we're in May of 2021, right? So this is when we're doing, although we recorded this earlier, like we're now speaking as of
this recap
today. Yeah. And remember, this is Micaiah, right?
This is
her, 15-year-old girl. 15-year-old girl.
That's a girl.
Right? And the piece of it that's interesting is not even what people say outside of it. Like as I'm learning to enhance my and be attentive to my psychological safety, I don't spend a lot of time like dealing with white people around topics. I don't do that. Yeah. I don't get caught in that. And that's another piece. We're going to get into this, and I have to give credit where credit is due. There's this girl a woman, an amazing clinician who does work with Heart in Louisville, Kentucky. Her name is Alicia Johnson. And, I have to give her credit for this concept of there's awareness, acknowledgement, and inaction, right? And so the reason why I don't give a lot of attention to white people at this point, because we seem to get caught up with white people in the acknowledgement phase. Like we want to be validated. We want to make sure that they recognize that this is happening. I'm beyond that. Like I don't need you to acknowledge. I see it every day. So if you choose to not acknowledge it, that's on you. So that's not where my energy is going. But this idea that acknowledgement versus invisibility is like a huge part of like what's happening, right? And for you in this microaggression, this was the first episode I think on microaggression.
Yeah, it was.
Right. Mm-hmm. What you were talking about, like even when you were informing the girl, the young lady, she was a young adult.
The young lady, young adult.
Because that you're gonna laugh once you listen to the episode. Like we have this whole dialogue about what we gonna call her.
The young adult.
She was a young adult. That girl. Because that's how you felt in that moment. That little girl, what you doing to my daughter?
I'm still upset.
Right. Girl, I was too. But this idea that, that young lady, like, we gave her credit and permission for not knowing and understanding, but it was just the absence of her awareness. She moved into some acknowledgement, which was awesome, but it like didn't take away from the sting that you had. And the even part that stood out to me the most about that episode was like, your daughter didn't even get it either. And that part was like, that was heartbreaking. Yeah. Because to think about, because I love the kids. Do you love the kids? To think about how much our kids are exposed to, how they're navigating all these spaces, and they're so unaware. And then as they continue to get older, and once you start realizing what's happening, it starts to all pile in on you. And we can't save our kids from that. No. And so part of our, our next series has to do with that dynamic of how do we work with our kids through this socialization, through this understanding, so what does parenting look like for our kids? What does parenting look like for our allies who want to help support our experience, with our young people? So that was the thing that was really, really, really pressing about the Mama Bear episode. Cause it's like, it just goes to show that, we get caught up in our own experiences as adults, but our kids, it's just so much. There's so much.
Yeah. Yes.
Which was, I'm sorry, did you have something to say?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, which was the nice segue into the last clip. And that last clip for me was the whole, like, and I said, literally, this was the phrase I used. I have a whole black son.
Quote.
A whole black son. So the clip number 4 from the microaggression number 1 segment. Clip number 5 is from the microaggression number 2 segment. Because this lets you know, like, we really got into this dialogue around parenting for us. And it really, really stood out to me that from an ally's perspective, I wanted to share, and be transparent about like what my experience is raising a young Black boy. Now, mind you, my son is he's a good 5'9" right now. He's a whole 14. My son's been super tall since like But at the age of 12, he looked like he was 16. I kid you not. Big. And then, walking around and his body is developing. I was like, man, somebody would have took him from me. Yeah. Like, imagine having to sit with that thought. Not on somebody's going to kidnap him and, he's out there and I won't be. No, like slave. Like that's what they did to my ancestors. That's what they literally, they bred me as the mother, as the woman. They bred me and they took my kids. And so I actually had that thought. I remember having that thought and I had to bring myself back and just be great. Like, oh my God, thank God. Like I get to keep my son and protect him. But it really pushed me over to the other end of, I really have to protect him. And this is what we deal with every day. Like I have to find ways to make sure I protect my baby. Because the world doesn't see him as some goofy kid who plays PlayStation all the time, who's in an anime, who likes Sasuke and whoever all is, Naruto, and literally with his big, almost 6 feet self, running with his arms behind him, looking like he gonna trip with his size 10, 9.5, 10 shoes, super skinny, right? Like,
okay, you're gonna stop talking about my Chris.
But I love him. I love him.
I know.
But he's a whole child.
Oh,
and just to have that just really
yes.
So
it just made, when you said that in that episode, like my body just like caught fire and like it's and I think I remember we talked about like this isn't history, like these are present day fears.
And it's present day fears because although in the 60s, right, they wasn't snatching them out of your hand. They'd absolutely take their life in front of you. Like this is literally the 60s. Like if a child, which is a whole nother dynamic, that's probably a whole nother series about parenting, how Black people parent. We typically follow a specific parenting style. And I know generationally we're moving away from some behaviors and some dynamics as parents, as we're learning and growing from our generation to the generation from the past. But to give context and understanding to why our parents were so like strict, and not like my mom, but my grandma, right? Like these people are still alive. Like my mom was born in 1960. So as if she was a boy growing up, like you had your kids on a very short leash. Now, yes, the white people do actually have their kids on leashes. But we had, no, for real, that whole that look we give now that we all laugh about. That was
like you can just look at a kid and your kid knows exactly like calm.
That means get your butt over
right
here
now. Because that was survival.
Exactly. Because Miss May, who wants to tell you cute and then wants to pet you like they still try to do to this day. Right? If you say the wrong thing or you look the wrong way, then her husband's coming around and his friends are coming around the corner and putting you in your place. Right. Or if you knock something over mistakenly in the store, that's your life. Or do you look at somebody the wrong way? Yeah, they're going to chastise you. And then to protect us as adults, because this is the thing, if you get out of pocket, they're going to correct us as adults. This was what was happening in the 50s and 60s. Yeah. So when we talk about the erroneous things, granted, I was raised by a 1960s mama, so there's some things that I did not transfer into my parenting style, but I want y'all to have understanding. Like this whole clip, this whole microaggression where we're moving forward with our parenting edition, this is stuff that we got to talk about because we are working to correct it, but you also want to understand why it existed. Exactly. Because I'm still protecting my son. I just have to do it in a different way. Now I have to go into the schools and sit them down and have a conversation with them. And we're going to get into, like, I even had to do that for my brother who was never physically violent, but who was like very verbally, like a very effective communicator. And he set boundaries well with adults. And they ain't like that. He's like, little Black boy, you in my private school on a scholarship. You better sit down. And I was like, no, I will go up I had to go up to the school and advocate for him. Y'all not going to suspend him? Yeah. She was out of pocket. She didn't respect him. So it's stuff like that, right? That that survival mode, that preparation.
So in this episode, we were going to name these episodes microaggressions, and really talk about that. But as we sort of moved through the conversation, we realized that we really needed to get specific with our language. That's probably another episode. in a soapbox that I get on a lot about getting very specific and accurate about language. What we're really talking about is racial abuse and racial trauma and how very present it is for us. So it's important for people to understand that when you do something and someone is like, oh, that's a microaggression or whatever, this incident has happened, what you're pricking is a lot more intense and deep and painful than just that one incident. You're sort of, and Darlene and I were talking about this earlier this week. It's like you're taking a toothpick and kind of picking at an open wound, and it's a little prick and a little prick and a little prick and a little prick, and that's painful. So our reaction, whether it's we shut down and we flee, whether we freeze in the moment, don't know what to do, fawn or fight, whatever form our reaction takes, you have to understand that it is coming from a place of pain and being wounded, right? And when if you can imagine scenarios where you have pain and you've been wounded and you're reacting, you know that you get angry too. You might cry, you might get angry, you might start to scream, you might just, like, all those reactions are human reactions. So we, again, like the thing that racism, particularly anti-Black racism, takes away from Black people is just the ability to just be a human, just be human and have natural human reactions. We are constantly like temping down our natural human reaction in response to, the society that we live in. So
that we exist in daily, every single day, without any reprieve. We get no reprieve. Like our entire existence is no reprieve.
Yeah.
And I like the point about the wound, right? Because one of the things you said was that, like, we're not making excuses. I'm also not looking for any sympathy. I want understanding.
Yeah.
So that whole dynamic that we talked about allyship, I understand, because I do this work, that white guilt becomes a part of this. I understand that defensiveness becomes a part of this. But what we're trying to convey in this context is this idea that, we're looking as an ally, we're looking for you to understand. And so in the understanding, the compassion that you give, that you provide, that compassion creates a safe space for us to exist. Because that's all we've been trying to do all these however many hundred years. We just want to exist without interruption.
Let us live.
Right, without interruption.
Yeah.
And the other piece about that prick is that oftentimes people, when they think of racism, they think of like it's extremes. It's like, no, racism is like being stabbed with a knife. No, that is not racism today. Racism today is little bitty skinny daggers, right? The little long prick, and it's toothpicks. So all little microaggressions like prick, 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 prick. It's not a stab. And that's how people think about it. It's like, well, I didn't say anything, because you didn't say anything directly or specifically or overtly in the way that you've heard people describe racism. That's not how racism exists today.
And if I may take it a step further, it's not even entirely pricks from people, it's pricks and small daggers from systems and institutions.
Yes, absolutely.
The racism has been codified, and y'all, it was very, very intentional. They knew what they were doing. If you go back and read the, the history on the Reconstruction era, the early 1900s, all the things that were happening, the dynamic that was playing out, particularly between the Southern lawmakers and congressmen and the Northern ones who kind of allowed Black people to be a bargaining chip. Because the Southerners were like, nope, we're preserving our way of life, and it's about state rights, and we're not going to pass or allow this anti-lynching law to happen. We're not going to allow, when the Social Security benefit, I can't remember all the history right now off the top, but like, so when Social Security was first created, they decided, because of how intelligent they were, that they were going to exclude farm workers and domestic workers. Well, guess who that was? That was Black people. They didn't say we're going to exclude Black people from Social Security benefits. Right? They just said, oh, we're going to exclude these folks because the majority of the people in those professions were Black. Yep. So this is what was happening. This is how the racism was codified and put into law and put into our policies and institutions. And then when now we try to call it out, you're like, oh, it's reverse racism. No, it's trying to reverse the racism that has already happened. Right. So anyway, let me get off that soapbox. It's just, don't we? We do. This whole entire podcast is a soapbox, I guess.
Right.
Grab a blanket and a pillow.
Right. So we've dug a lot into kind of what our thoughts were when we started our podcast early on in that summer of 2020. And you've heard a lot about what we thought about the experiences and the ideas and the topics that were really at the forefront of our minds. And so because of that, we want to make sure that we move into a series that continues this conversation around allyship, but really anchor it into a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, which is the racial and identity development that occurs throughout our parenting experience. So this is obviously, so I know when you hear the word parenting, you think, oh, this isn't for me, but I encourage you to strongly stick around and be on the lookout for this series, because we were all parented. And so the things we're going to talk about has a lot to do with the messaging, the language, the way we develop our thoughts and ideas about the world and about ourselves. And so that's why we gave it the parenting edition scope, because we were all parenting. And for me, it's going to be really important.
So for anybody that's a parent, whether you're a parent of a Black child or not, if you love a Black child, this would be relevant for you. But you're also saying that we've all been parented. So we might learn something about ourselves from the way that we were parented.
Absolutely.
From the conversation that we're going to have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why it's relevant for everyone. So I don't want you to hear parenting and don't show up. I want you to come along. And especially for our allies, we talked a lot in previous podcasts or previous episodes about, what you can do. Allyship can start very young, and you'll hear that in our conversations about what it means and the languages that's used in school settings. I wish we could bring some teachers forward, right? Like, hey, teachers, what kind of things do you have to deal with around race issues in your classrooms, right? Because this stuff happens, we talk about it pretty early, so.
Yeah. And we'll have some good stories for you too, as always.
Absolutely.
All right. We want to hear from you all. We say it in our outro and we mean it. So if you have questions for us, please email us, message us at Wanna Be an Ally on Instagram. We can actually craft the topics to address some of the questions that you send us. We're caught up now. We're now in May of 2021. So we are actually recording the episodes in near real time. And we want to hear directly from our listeners. So definitely email us. Let us know what you think about our discussions. Ask questions that you have as we plan out new content. We can weave that in.
All right, folks, we're going to end it there for now. We want to make sure we hear from you. So send us a note or your thoughts on the question of the day. And if you want to speak to us on a topic, send it our way. You can find us on our social media platform at wannabeanally, or email us at wannabeanally@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to So You Want to Be an Ally wherever you get your personal podcasts.
You can find me, Olanike, at my website, www.mosaicforequity.com. That's Mosaic, MOSAIC, 4 as in the digit 4, equity, EQUITY. Follow me on Facebook and on LinkedIn at Mosaic for Equity. You can find me with that handle, and on Instagram as well.
You can find me, Darlene, at my website, www.parentzonellc.com. And follow me on Facebook at Donnie Davis, that's DAUNI, and Parent Zone LLC. And on Instagram at PZ Parenting Coaching. All right, we're out.
Bye.